Hello, and welcome to Star Wars Stories Extended. This is the story of C-3PO, Part 1. C-3PO was originally activated on the Cybot Galactica Foundry world of Alpha in the year 112 BBY. Sometime in his early existence, he had served as a protocol droid to the emissary of the Manacron system. Nearly 80 years later, his head and gutted chassis had been discarded in a street of the city of Mos Espa on Tatooine and were discovered by two human youths, Anakin Skywalker and Kitster Banai. A poor slave, Anakin decided to rebuild the C-3PO series protocol droid and began smuggling C-3PO to his home piece by piece. Due to this hodgepodge reconstruction, C-3PO had more mechanical similarities to the TC series protocol droid than to his original model. Skywalker's intention was that the reactivated protocol droid would function as a servant to his mother, helping her with chores around the house while he worked at a nearby junk shop. C-3PO's gyro balance circuitry was several decades old, but Skywalker was able to use scrounged and improvised replacement parts to make the droid functional again. C-3PO boasted sound wiring as well as a standard protocol droid verbobrain and communicator module, but Skywalker could not afford even the simplest of droid coverings, and as such, left the droid's wiring exposed. C-3PO's salvaged nature imbued special qualities in him that were absent from other protocol droids. Skywalker sometimes brought C-3PO with him when bartering with nearby Jawa traders and employed the droid's fluency in over 6 million forms of communication after discovering a wounded Tusken Raider. With the assistance of C-3PO's translation, Skywalker was able to nurse the Tusken Raider back to health. Although the Raider grew annoyed with the protocol droid and roared at him to shut up, this caused C-3PO to become rather offended. When Skywalker met several off-worlders in the shop of his owner, the junk dealer Watto, he invited them to safety of his home as refuge from a coming sandstorm. The Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn, the Queen of Naboo Padme Amidala, and the Gungan Jar Jar Binks, and the astromech droid R2-D2 were brought to the slave quarters that Skywalker shared with his mother Shmi, and Amidala and R2-D2 were introduced to C-3PO. Upon meeting R2-D2, C-3PO was shocked when the candid astromech droid commented that he was naked. Despite the exchange, the two droids fast developed a friendship of sorts, working together to help Skywalker make final adjustments to his pod racer in time to race it in the Bunta Eve Classic race. While working on the racer, the two droids discussed space travel and noted the clumsy action of Binks. On the day of the race, C-3PO represented his owner in the opening flag parade, carrying Skywalker's flag onto the course prior to the start of the race. He then stood on the sidelines with R2-D2 and two of the Skywalker's playmates. Skywalker won the race. As Skywalker prepared to depart Tatooine, he said his goodbyes to C-3PO, apologizing for not having completed the droid's construction, and expressing his wishes that Shmi wouldn't sell him. Soon afterward, Grandmaster Yoda of the Jedi Order dispatched a Jedi recruit to Tatooine to program stories into C-3PO's memory. The young Jedi programmed several tales of anecdotes related to Skywalker, Queen Amidala, and the Jedi. Despite this fact, C-3PO would claim that he never was good at storytelling. 2 years later, Shmi covered C-3PO with heavily tarnished silver plating so that he might last longer in Tatooine's sandy environment. In another 3 years, Shmi, who was still in Watto's possession, was sold to Cliegg Lars, a moisture farmer who lived with his son Owen on a farm in the Great Chott Salt Flat near the city of Anchorhead. Lars married Shmi and freed her from her bonds. Shmi brought C-3PO with her, and the droid served the Lars family at their home for another 5 years. In 22 BBY, shortly after Shmi was abducted by a group of Tusken Raiders, C-3PO was working on a moisture evaporator on the property when Skywalker, now a Jedi Padawan, arrived with Amidala, now a senator of the Galactic Republic. He initially didn't recognize Skywalker until the latter finished his name for him when introducing himself. Greeting his maker, C-3PO discovered that Skywalker had come in search of his mother and brought the two guests into the homestead's courtyard, where they were met by Owen and Cliegg Lars, as well as Owen's girlfriend Beru Whitesun. Learning of his mother's peril, Skywalker took Owen's speeder bike to find her and soon returned with her corpse, having recovered it from a Tusken village. C-3PO was present when he arrived and later attended a funeral for Shmi on the farm's property. When R2-D2, who had been waiting aboard Amidala's nearby yacht, interrupted the funeral with an urgent message for the Padawan, C-3PO translated the astromech's binary beeps and whistles. After viewing the holocom message, Skywalker and Amidala prepared to depart Tatooine for Geonosis to rescue Skywalker's Jedi Master Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Owen gave C-3PO to Skywalker as a parting gift. Entering the Clone Wars. the Battle of Geonosis. Landing the Senator's yacht inside an exhaust vent on Geonosis, Skywalker and Amidala set out, leaving the droids behind. C-3PO reluctantly followed R2-D2. The droids soon discovered an entrance to a battle droid factory. As C-3PO viewed the scene before him in awe, he found the concept of machines making machines quite perverse, but was knocked off the platform on which he stood by R2-D2 before he could comment further. C-3PO tumbled onto a moving platform but was tossed off by a large droid's mechanical arm. After landing on a conveyor belt, he righted himself and walked along the belt's length before his head was knocked off by moving machinery. His head landed on a conveyor belt which carried the heads of B-1 battle droids, and his body wandered onto a separate belt which carried the battle droids' bodies. Unaware of the mix-up, the machines continued their construction, which resulted in C-3PO's head being grafted to a battle droid's body and his body receiving a battle droid's head. Both incarnations of C-3PO joined a force of B-1 battle droids that soon marched into a Geonosian execution arena. Once inside, the droids surrounded a strike force of 200 Jedi. The battle droids attacked the Jedi. The battle droid head grafted to C-3PO's body found itself unable to properly fight, while C-3PO's head was very unnerved by its autonomous body and began apologizing to any Jedi that the body fired its E5 blaster at. However, both incarnations soon suffered a mix-up of programming. C-3PO's body fired several shots from his rifle until a bolt deflected by a human Jedi separated it from its battle droid head. The protocol droid's head began screaming insults at the Jedi Knights that its battle droid body fired laser blasts at. The Jedi Master Kit Fisto was able to neutralize the threat posed by the latter incarnation, however, by using the Force to knock it onto the arena floor, where a B-2 super battle droid fell on top of it, effectively putting it out of battle. R2-D2 entered the melee and used his cable gun to detach C-3PO's head from its battle droid body before dragging it across the arena and reattaching it to the correct torso. Shortly after the battle, R2-D2 and C-3PO accompanied Amidala and Skywalker back to Naboo, where they were the lone witnesses to a wedding between the two in the planet's Lake Country. C-3PO was given to Senator Amidala as a wedding gift from Skywalker, and the droid would go on to serve as Amidala's personal protocol droid throughout most of the Clone Wars. When on Naboo, the Senator often assigned C-3PO to assist the Naboo Royal Council. Early in the war, C-3PO was on the galactic capital of Coruscant and witnessed Skywalker depart the planet in a starfighter on his way to lay siege to Munalinst. Following the defense of Naboo and the bioplague of Omadun unleashed by the Confederacy, Queen Jamilia appointed C-3PO to serve as liaison to the Jedi during the remainder of that campaign. Sometime later, C-3PO was traveling with Amidala in her yacht while the ship was host to Yoda. After Yoda convinced Amidala and her head of security, Captain Typho, to make a detour, the ship headed to Ilum on a rescue mission. After returning to Coruscant, C-3PO received new gold plating to replace his dull silver ones. Afterward, he and Amidala, both disguised in hooded cloaks, were walking in Coruscant's Undercity when the Senator disappeared. Searching for her, C-3PO was pulled into an alleyway by Skywalker, who had been engaging in a private rendezvous with Amidala. After being told by the Padawan that he looked different, C-3PO removed his cloak and revealed his new plating. Skywalker was promptly calmed and summoned by Obi-Wan Kenobi, and was subsequently granted the title Jedi Knight. Free of his Padawan braid, he gave the hairpiece to C-3PO to present to Amidala as a gift. Amidala returned the favor by giving R2-D2 to Skywalker, separating the two droids once more. While Anakin was leading a fleet of Republic warships against the Separatist heavy cruiser Malevolence, C-3PO was in Amidala's apartment, aiding the Senator and Jar Jar Binks in sifting through data cards for any mention of the cruiser or its fate. Minus Binks, the group took Amidala's yacht to a point of space near the Khalida Shoals Medical Center to contact a member of the Separatist-allied intergalactic banking clan who had sued for peace. With the Senator focused on the mission, C-3PO set the hyperspace course and filed away several messages that had arrived from Rodian Senator on Akonda Far via the HoloNet. When the ship exited hyperspace, the two found themselves caught in a trap. as Dooku had arranged for them to arrive immediately adjacent to the crippled Malevolence, which was incapable of hyperspace travel after being battered by Anakin's fleet. The yacht became trapped in the cruiser's tractor beam, but Amidala set the yacht's engines to destroy themselves as she and C-3PO snuck out of their ship and onto the Malevolence. Following the yacht's explosion, C-3PO and Amidala made their way through the cruiser's corridors and attempted to get a broken comm panel working in order to contact Anakin's fleet. However, they were forced to hide when C-3PO spotted an advancing squad of battle droids led by General Grievous, the supreme commander of the Confederacy's droid armies. After the squad passed by, Padme was able to contact Anakin, who had boarded the Malevolence along with Kenobi and R2-D2. They agreed to meet amidst the cruiser's railjet system. When C-3PO and Padme arrived, they were accosted by battle droids, which prompted the Senator to push the protocol droid into a moving hover train. After the battle droid threat was neutralized, Kenobi began levitating C-3PO to safety, but the floating droid was hit full-on by a moving hover train, which was only halted when R2-D2 sliced into a computer terminal and shut it down. The sudden stop launched C-3PO onto a nearby platform, where he quickly regained his bearings and again began wandering the cruiser's corridors before being located by R2-D2. The two droids joined Anakin and Padme in racing to the Twilight, a freighter that Skywalker had brought aboard, where they rendezvoused with Kenobi and fled the Malevolence, which, owing to an act of sabotage by Anakin and Padme, exploded when its hyperdrive was activated. After returning to Coruscant, Padme received Senator Farr's messages and prepared to travel to Rhodia in a bid to ensure that the beleaguered planet remained loyal to the Republic. C-3PO and Representative Jar Jar Binks began to prepare her star skid for takeoff from a landing platform when they were approached by the conmen Daniel Fatoni and Ahmed Bek, who were posing as Republic judicials. C-3PO calmly acquiesced when the scammers claimed that they were commandeering the skiff for government business. But before the droid could disengage the ship's autopilot, Binks mistakenly caused the entire platform to flip upside down. The Gungan quickly righted the platform, but the confusion caused C-3PO to forget to turn the autopilot off, which ultimately caused Fatoni and Medbek to be taken directly to the Senate commandos that they had been fleeing from. With the skiff gone, C-3PO and Binks began preparing Amidala's new yacht instead. When the trio took the yacht to Rhodia's senatorial palace, C-3PO and Binks were instructed to remain at its landing platform while Padme conducted talks with Senator Farr. After an attempt by the two at communicating with local swamp creatures and resulted in fruit being thrown at the protocol droid's face, a squad of B-1 battle droids approached the yacht as Senator Farr had recently struck a deal with Viceroy Newt Gunray of the Separatist Allied Trade Federation. The unintentional machinations of the clumsy Gungan then set off a series of events. The yacht's hatch closed, C-3PO became stuck to a magnetic hoist that swung into then destroyed the battle droids, and an LM-432 crab droid arrived before plummeting off the landing platform into water with Binks atop it. Still stuck to the magnetic hoist, C-3PO lamented that he believed to be the Gungan's death before Binks climbed back onto the platform and released the droid from his magnetism. His next clumsy action was to crush and destroy the yacht with the hoist, however. As the two secured what remained of the ship's bridge, Binks discovered a Jedi-esque cloak and rushed off to save Padme, whom they deduced had been taken hostage by Separatist forces. C-3PO was again reunited with R2-D2 during a trip to Orto Plutonia when Padme lent the protocol droid to Anakin for the mission to the icy world. When contact was lost with a planet-side military outpost, Anakin and Kenobi brought the droids and a contingent of clone cold assault troopers to investigate, and were accompanied by Senator Rio Chuchi of Pantora, as well as Chi Cho, chairman of the Pantoran Assembly, due to the planet's location in Pantoran space. When the Jedi discovered that the clone troopers stationed on Pantora had been wiped out by a group of local Tals, C-3PO and Cho joined them in meeting with Thi Sin, the Tal's tribal leader. C-3PO translated as Thi Sin welcomed Cho in peace, and when Cho responded by angrily declaring war on the natives. The conflict was quickly halted when Chuchi received permission from the Pantoran speaker of the assembly to negotiate peace, and C-3PO and R2-D2 accompanied Chuchi the Jedi, and what clone troopers were not fighting to the scene of the battle, where Chuchi, aided by C-3PO's translation, made peace with T-Sen. Shortly after the mission to Orto Plutonia, Queen Niutni of Naboo summoned Padme home after discovering a scouting party of battle droids on the planet. Padme brought C-3PO and Representative Binks in another new Nubian yacht to investigate with the hope of procuring military aid. After landing in the hangar of Theed's royal palace, the three were taken to a secure room by Niutni and Typho where a powered-down T-Series tactical droid was being analyzed. When the droid awoke but found itself without the use of its photoreceptors, C-3PO convinced it that it was aboard a separatist ship and managed to glean that there was a secret lab producing some sort of virus before Binks' clumsiness destroyed the droid. Binks, however, had found an insect inside the droid that he identified as coming from Naboo's eastern swamps. The entire party contacted Jedi Masters Yoda and Mace Windu to request the aid of Anakin and Obi-Wan Kenobi. C-3PO and Typho remained in Theed to attempt to uncover data from other captured battle droids, while Amidala and Binks left to scout the swamps and discovered a hologram of the scientist Dr. Nuvo Vindi inside a B-1's head. Joined by the Gungan Peppy Bo, who had discovered traces of the deadly blue shadow virus in a nearby river, they greeted Anakin, Kenobi, Ahsoka Tano, and R2-D2 as they arrived on planet, and showed them the hologram before the Jedi set out to discover Vindi's laboratory. The Mad Doctor was synthesizing an airborne strain of the virus, but the Jedi and their clone troopers were able to subdue him and prevent him from escaping his laboratory. Shortly after the Blue Shadow crisis, C-3PO was back on Coruscant and accompanied Senator Bail Organa of Alderaan to Amidala's office in the Republic Executive Building. The two escorted Amidala to the lobby of the Senate building, where the Grand Senator Philo had called a meeting of important senators in anticipation of a vote on the proposed Enhanced Privacy Invasion Bill. The meeting was interrupted, however, by the bounty hunter Cad Bane and several other mercenaries who began holding the senators and their aides hostage in a bid to force a pardon for Zero the Hutt. Bane shot and killed Philo, and his companions successfully subdued Anakin, who had been elsewhere in the Senate building at the time. After an unconscious Anakin was brought to the group of hostages, the bounty hunters left but rigged a system of lasers that would trigger planted explosives with the slightest touch. After regaining consciousness, Anakin used his lightsaber to cut a hole around the group, dropping them to safety in the room below just before Bane remotely activated the explosives. C-3PO remained on Coruscant for some time afterwards, and when Anakin arrived at Amidala's apartment to surprise his wife with dinner, the protocol droid warmly greeted his maker before being promptly ignored and subsequently dismissed by Amidala. The married couple were soon sent by the Jedi Council to Cato Nemoidia, along with Senator Rush Clovis of the Banking Clan, and brought C-3PO and R2-D2 with them. Amidala would parley the Senator Lot Dodd of the Trade Federation while simultaneously spying on Clovis, as both Dodd and Clovis were suspected of being in league with the Confederacy. After Amidala's star skiff landed outside of Dodd's palace, C-3PO accompanied Amidala and Clovis as they greeted the Nemoidian senator, but soon found himself largely unneeded. He was dismissed by Clovis for the night following dinner and retired to the quarters that Amidala had been assigned. There, he found an agitated Anakin who quickly left after being calmed by his wife. Padme was soon poisoned by Dodd and was brought to her quarters by Clovis to be attended to by C-3PO and a 21B surgical droid. Anakin sought an antidote to her poison and brought her to the palace's lobby to confront Dodd, and was followed by C-3PO and Clovis. When Clovis threatened Dodd's life, C-3PO accepted the antidote from one of Dodd's aides. With the antidote and a data card that Padme had obtained that implicated Clovis in a separatist scheme procured, Anakin, Padme, and the droids left the planet, leaving Clovis at the mercy of the Trade Federation. Remaining at Padme's side, C-3PO accompanied her and Obi-Wan in the Senator's repulsor pod within the Senate's Grand Convocation Chamber as Padme presented evidence to the gathered senators that revealed the wishes of Mandalore's Deputy Minister Jarek that his planet remain neutral in the war. C-3PO attended several meetings of the informal coalition in Padme's office, and accompanied his master as she spoke to the Senate regarding their views. While he was serving drinks at one such meeting, Senator Farr of Rhodia suffered what appeared to be a heart attack and died. C-3PO attended his funeral, and Padme and Senator Organa soon after discovered that he had been poisoned by his aide, Lolo Pers. C-3PO and R2-D2 were dispatched on a mercy mission to Aileen alongside the clone trooper Wolfpack. A series of deadly groundquakes had shaken the planet, and C-3PO's role in the relief team was to act as a translator between the clones and the native Alina. They arrived in the ruined city. A brief aftershock then rumbled through the ground, and C-3PO's insistence that the Alina remain calm earned him a cheer from the delighted locals. While R2-D2 left to download information, C-3PO remained with Clone Commander Wolf, who was overseeing the setup of temporary hospitals and kitchens. However, Manchucho refused the kitchen, insisting that the relief team first needed to make peace in the ground. C-3PO soon left Wolf's side to seek out R2-D2. A small group of Alina were insistent that the two droids come and see something, and C-3PO and R2-D2 followed them to a large hole in the ground that was mostly covered by a heavy seal. C-3PO was sent tumbling into the hole by another aftershock, and R2-D2 followed his friend down. After landing in a dark subterranean cavern, the droid sought a way out with the aid of R2-D2's glow rod. What C-3PO initially took to be daylight ahead turned out to be phosphorescent plants in the midst of an underground forest. C-3PO was then surrounded by what appeared to be glowing insects, but the pests were shooed by R2-D2's fire extinguishing foam. However, the action caused several of the forest trees to stand up and encircle the droids. Actually members of the Kindalo species, they demanded to know why the droids had come and why the surface dwellers has disturbed their peace. C-3PO began to explain himself, and one Kindalo revealed that the ground had shaken in order to keep the deadly surface air out of the underground. When C-3PO offered to help solve their problem, he was directed to see someone called Orphney, and he and R2-D2 quickly departed. Inside of a chamber, the glowing insects reappeared and metamorphosed into a radiant female being, Orphney. Orphney told of an ancient covenant between the Alina and the subterranean dwellers that had recently been broken by the movement of poisonous surface air to their world that did not go through the natural filtering process. The underground dwellers had caused a groundquake in retaliation. Eager to prevent more Alina deaths, C-3PO offered to seal the breach, but the mysterious Orphney disappeared after leaving them with a riddle. You can run, but you cannot walk. You have a mouth, but cannot talk. You have a head, but never weep. You have a bed, but never sleep. Ask yourself, who are you? C-3PO bid R2-D2 to play back the riddle one more time, and then began to ponder its meaning. Unbeknownst to the protocol droid, R2-D2 found several circles on the floor that were decorated with symbols representing the four elements. When he sprayed some water on the appropriate circle, it helped C-3PO solve the riddle. A river. The chamber's central circle then rose in the air on a jet of water and carried both droids back to Aleen's surface. Both droids were launched high into the air and sent crashing down next to the hole through which they had initially fallen. Toxic underground air was rising through the breach and causing nearby Alina to cough, which prompted R2-D2 to pull on it with his cable gun. C-3PO added his own strength by pushing, and the droids successfully sealed the hole. The two worlds were once more separated. At that moment, several clone troopers arrived. Skeptical of C-3PO's claims of an adventure, they escorted the droids back to the LAATs. Manchucho thanked C-3PO for his help, and the group launched to return to their ship and proceed to a rendezvous with Jedi Master Adi Gallia. While traveling aboard Gallia's Venator-class Star Destroyer en route to Republic space, C-3PO communicated with a holographic image of Amidala that was displayed by R2-D2. She told the protocol droid that he was needed back on Coruscant, but that plan was curtailed by the arrival of a Separatist fleet. An evacuation was ordered after the Venator's main reactor was hit and a Separatist attack force boarded the Star Destroyer. In a corridor, C-3PO and R2-D2 saw General Grievous engage Master Gallia in a lightsaber duel, and they consequently fled in search of an escape pod. When they ended up in a hangar, C-3PO reluctantly followed R2-D2 into a Y-Wing bomber, which the astromech operated from the droid socket and piloted out into the unfolding space battle. R2-D2 destroyed one Separatist Vulture droid, but eventually took them to the nearby planet Petitite, Patuna, when the Venator was turned into stellar debris. A pursuing Vulture droid knocked out the fighter's reactor, but when it lost them in the atmosphere's cloud cover, R2-D2 brought the Y-Wing around behind it and destroyed it. The Y-Wing's reactor then shut down and the droids crash-landed into a marsh. After climbing out of the damaged ship, C-3PO and R2-D2 were charged at by the world's natives, the diminutive Patitites, who stood less than half a meter tall. The droids' dismissal of them as a threat was countered by strikes from the Patitites' powered spears, which produced electrical currents and knocked both droids to the ground. C-3PO and R2-D2 were both then tied to the ground and told of the virtues of the big Heizu, their leader. Heizu soon arrived on the scene and banished them from the planet, but when the droids were cut loose, an offended R2-D2 approached the Patitite leader with the intention of fighting. C-3PO tried to intervene, but ended up inadvertently knocking the astromech droid down and turning the Heizu into a pile of goo. Free from their leader's despotism, the Patitites cheered his conquerors and set to work helping R2-D2 fix the Y-Wing. Several of them asked C-3PO to be their new leader, but he instead decided to introduce them to democracy. The three smartest and most compassionate Patitites were brought forward, and the new leader to be chosen by way of applause, but squabbling broke out between the divided crowd. C-3PO and R2-D2 quickly boarded the repaired starfighter and left the Patitites to their new democracy, knocking them all over with the backwash of the ship's ion drive in the process. During their flight from Patitite Patuna, the droids realized that ship and occupants alike were running out of power. They accordingly touched down on the nearby planet of Balnab, and a frightened C-3PO followed his companion into the fog after R2-D2 scanned for a viable power source. However, a group of Balnab hunters quickly found them and ensnared them in a net. The two droids were brought to a clearing surrounded by canyon walls, where an enormous hologram of Albi Diwa, a being of the same species as most of the Balnab hunters, killed one of his underlings with a bolt of lightning for daring to show independent thought by bringing non-living things before him. C-3PO did not hesitate to point out that he was a hologram, and Diwa responded by sending more lightning bolts striking the ground around the protocol droid. Meanwhile, R2-D2 discovered a hidden room in a canyon wall and learned that Diwa was nothing more than a false being projected by 4 DUM series pit droids at computers. When he shoved one of the droids out into the open, the ruse was revealed and the Balnab hunters stormed the hidden room. A light fight ensued, and C-3PO and R2-D2 walked away from the ensuing explosions that rocked the canyon. C-3PO and R2-D2 made their way back to the Y-Wing, but were forced to stop under a large mushroom as they both ran out of power. Not long afterward, a group of Weequay pirates found them and brought droids and Y-Wing alike aboard their pirate ship, the Marauder. C-3PO and R2-D2 were plugged in to recharge, but when they awoke, they were ushered into a droid fighting ring, where the ASP series droid KO-5D was vanquishing all challengers with deadly flamethrowers. The droids were forced into the ring, but were saved by a hull breach when General Grievous' flagship arrived in system and decided to use the Marauder as target practice. C-3PO grabbed hold of R2-D2 as the astromech used his booster rockets to carry them through space and safely take them to a hangar aboard Grievous' ship. A group of B-1 battle droids immediately arrested them and sent them to the incinerator, where they were placed on a conveyor belt that began edging them toward their doom. As luck had it, a Republic fleet arrived at that moment and attacked, and R2-D2 rocketed both himself and C-3PO away from the incinerator in the midst of the chaos. They found both Adi Gallia and Master Plo Koon destroying a small resistance force of battle droids, as Grievous had fled at the first sign of trouble. A stunned Commander Wolffe recognized C-3PO and R2-D2, and C-3PO regaled him with the tale of their adventures as the Republic forces returned to their fleet. 3 years into the war, Senator Amidala yet sought to entice neutral worlds to join the Republic, and she brought C-3PO and Captain Typho on a mission to the planet Biral. R2-D2 joined the trio, and as Amidala negotiated with President Vul, she told the droids not to stray too far from the presidential palace. Nevertheless, they took a ride on a Brialian sky sled and crashed into a forest. C-3PO's head was separated from his body, and after it argued with R2-D2 over whose fault the accident had been, the astromech left to retrieve the body. In his absence, a green creature considered eating C-3PO's head, but ultimately tossed it down the side of a hill. It rolled into a river, and R2-D2 arrived with C-3PO's body in tow to make a rescue. However, a large mammoth was grazing by the riverbank, and after an electrocution from R2-D2, it swatted both droids high into the air. The droid's rough landing crushed 3 Bralian rebels who had secretly thrown their lot with Count Dooku. The rebels had outfitted their soldiers with clone trooper armor and planned to storm the presidential palace. C-3PO's head was hurriedly reattached by R2-D2, and when the droids came across the foe troopers, loose servo motors in C-3PO caused his hand to slap one trooper in the face. The rebel fell to the ground and accidentally blasted a companion, which led to a panic among the rebels and a round of blasting. A thermal detonator was thrown and C-3PO and R2-D2 were suddenly the only ones left standing. Ignorant of the plot they had just foiled, they returned to the palace, where Padme berated them for being out too late. In the same year, the Republic chased the Confederacy from the core worlds and Inner Rim and began taking the fight to their opponents in the Outer Rim. Padme's Loyalist Committee of Senators saw this as a cue for the Supreme Chancellor to relinquish his emergency powers, and scheduled an appointment for him to discuss the matter. C-3PO and Padme joined their Loyalist compatriots outside of Palpatine's office, where they were dismissed by the Sate Pestage, one of his chief advisors. Despite this, the group waited for Palpatine to conclude a meeting with the rest of his inner circle, and was eventually welcomed in by the Chancellor. As Senator Organa appealed that Palpatine overturn the Enhanced Security and Enforcement Act that allowed warrantless searches and seizures, the Chancellor told him to bring it before the Senate and recognized C-3PO as having been built by Anakin. C-3PO was honored that the Chancellor remembered him. The distraction offered by the Outer Rim sieges allowed Separatists to launch a siege of Coruscant and kidnap the Supreme Chancellor. During the battle, a hole was blown in the side of Padme's apartment, causing a good deal of distress to C-3PO. His master was unfazed, however, and along with C-3PO and Typho's assistant, began evacuating the residents of the building. Afterwards, C-3PO and Padme made their way to the Senate Rotunda and rendezvoused with Senators Organa and Mon Mothma, who were in the company of Jedi Masters Shakti and Stas Ali. As Separatist vulture droids and droid fighters flew through the planet's skyways and rained destruction down on the Coruscanti people, the two Jedi were searching for and attempting to protect the Chancellor. They offered Ali's skimmer to the senators and took off on T's speeder bike to Palpatine's residence at the 500 Republica building. C-3PO and the senators boarded the skimmer, and Senator Organa piloted it through thick traffic, but they were soon shot down by vulture droids and made a crash landing on a landing platform. After exiting the downed vehicle, Amidala and Organa used blasters to keep vulture droids in patrol mode at bay in order to allow LAAT gunships clear shots at them, and the group then took refuge in the Embassy Mall shopping center. Outside of the Embassy shopping center, C-3PO conferred with a Silver Protocol droid who warned him that dark times were ahead. He told C-3PO to accept a memory wipe if it was ever offered, as the alternative would be living in confusion as the lines between good and evil were blurred. The Silver Protocol droid departed, and C-3PO and Padme watched on the Embassy's holonet monitor as General Grievous displayed the abducted Chancellor and proclaimed the end of the Republic was at hand. Obi-Wan, Anakin, and R2-D2 returned from the Outer Rim, boarded Grievous's flagship, the Invisible Hand, killed Count Dooku, and rescued the Chancellor. Grievous and the Separatists then fled the planet. C-3PO joined the Senate's Loyalist Committee and Mace Windu in welcoming in the day's heroes outside the Senate building. After greeting R2-D2, C-3PO was entertained by the astromech's tales of the rescue. As Padme grew more distressed by the increasing amount of power held by Palpatine, she drafted a petition asking him to lay down his emergency powers and began hosting other concerned senators at meetings in her apartment. During at least one such meeting, C-3PO served drinks to the gathered senators. The days after the Separatist attack were harrowing ones for both Padme and Anakin, and they ultimately saw the latter fall to the dark side of the Force under the influence of Palpatine, who was actually the Sith Lord Darth Sidious and had been conspiring against the Jedi. As Jedi across the galaxy were killed, Anakin, now known as Darth Vader, brought the 501st Legion of clone troopers to the Jedi Temple and slaughtered all of the Jedi present. As Padme watched the temple burn from her apartment window, C-3PO contacted the office of the Chancellor and learned that Anakin had returned to the temple. Darth Vader and R2-D2 then arrived at the apartment in Vader's Jedi Starfighter. C-3PO briefly conversed with R2-D2 before Vader took the fighter to Mustafar, where he killed the entire Separatist Council and ended the war. After learning of his fall to the dark side from Obi-Wan, Padme took C-3PO to Mustafar to see him. C-3PO piloted the skiff, allowing a reprieve for the distraught senator. Unbeknownst to Padme and C-3PO, Obi-Wan stowed away aboard the skiff and his arrival at Mustafar caused an enraged Vader to choke his wife with the Force. As he and Obi-Wan left the platform and engaged in a lightsaber duel, C-3PO and R2-D2 brought Padme back aboard the skiff and attempted to stabilize her condition. Obi-Wan soon returned, having defeated Vader, and piloted the skiff with C-3PO to the planetoid Polis Massa to rendezvous with Yoda and Senator Bail Organa. Padme was brought to a medical center where C-3PO, R2-D2, Obi-Wan, Bail Organa, and Yoda bore witness to the birth of two twins she had been carrying, Luke and Leia. Weakened and without the will to continue living, Padme Amidala passed away on the operating table. Later, Bail Organa entrusted C-3PO and R2-D2, the captain of the Tantive 4, who was instructed to treat them well and, to C-3PO's horror, to wipe the protocol droid's memory. As Bail Organa intended for the droids to one day belong to Leia, he knew that erasing all knowledge of the child's parents from C-3PO was the best way to keep the chatty droid from revealing her true parentage. In the early years of the Empire's reign, the droid duo were in one of the Tantive 4's escape pods while the ship's chief petty officer, Corla Mentonay, was supervising test launches of the pods in the Maramir system. The Lock Revenants, a local pirate group, attacked the Tantive 4, which was forced to flee and to abandon its jettisoned pods. Bail Organa made the finding of such valuable property an imperative priority, but the droids were captured by the Lock Revenants. They shared an adventure or two with the freebooters, but after suddenly finding themselves free of their captors, C-3PO and R2-D2 sought out employment with the Intergalactic Droid Agency. They were placed aboard a shuttle en route to the planet Dodge to meet their new master, the crystal merchant Lot Kemp. Aboard the shuttle, several other droids made disparaging wisecracks about the tiny world's barren landscape. After landing, the counterparts trekked to the address they had been given, only to find Kemp's home in ruins. A young human male named Jost Ellen appeared with a blaster drawn, but when C-3PO explained himself, Ellen calmed down and revealed that the Dod's Governor Coog unleashed a massive destroyer droid against any who refused to pay his exorbitant tax rates. Kemp had been the latest victim, although he had survived and gone missing. Ellen recruited C-3PO and R2-D2 to serve him and help him with lifting things. They then boarded Ellen's land speeder and made their way to the boy's home. Having lost his family to the Coog's destroyer, Ellen lived in a modest cave dwelling scattered with technology that he scavenged and sold. C-3PO and R2-D2 discovered an old Ranger X-1 defense robot which only activated when Ellen gave it a swift kick. The Ranger's power was almost depleted, but a reflexive shove that sent C-3PO tumbling into a tub of water was enough to convince Ellen that he now had the means with which to stand up to Coog. The boy and his three droids raced to the main dwelling of the planet's Citizens Council, only to find that Coog had just terrorized them and forced them to pay triple what he had previously asked for. Head Councilman Althon had given up hope, but a mysterious old man convinced Ellen to fight against Coog's tyranny. C-3PO and R2-D2 accompanied Ellen as he journeyed to Coog's mansion the next day with his Ranger, and when Coog unleashed the destroyer, a battle began. The Ranger gained the upper hand but quickly began to lose power. When Ellen tried to interfere, the destroyer easily knocked him over. The Ranger only made it back into the fight when R2-D2 fired his cables at the droid and used himself as a medium through which to siphon power from the destroyer to the Ranger. However, he overloaded, and although the destroyer exploded, R2-D2 was left severely depleted of power. Coog was taken into citizens' custody, and Ellen saw the droids safely aboard an Intergalactic Droid Agency shuttle that had been dispatched to retrieve them for repairs. It was bound for the droid repair station of the scientist Lon Id, whom they hoped would repair R2-D2's microsynapse damage. When the Anu Dat gangster Tig From came to the space station to steal a powerful laser from Id, C-3PO and R2-D2 helped Id's children, Vic and Nikki, free the scientist. C-3PO donned the outer shell of a Guardian droid and destroyed all of From's hover guard droids, allowing Vic to trap From in a packing net and turn him over to the authorities. Lon Id gratefully repaired R2-D2, and his children ferried both droids to a nearby Intergalactic Droid Agency station, where they were almost immediately purchased by Ambassador Zell of of Major, and assigned to act as tutors and companions of Zell's son, Les, who had dreams of dismantling C-3PO and using R2-D2 for entertainment purposes. During a diplomatic mission to Armath that saw Zell command a fleet of Majoran consular ships, Les fled from his father and took up with the pirate Red Jack, but returned to his father when Red Jack was personally defeated by Zell.